What happens when love, trust, and deception collide in the most disastrous way? One shocking secret was kept hidden in an apparently flawless marriage, the kind that, when discovered, caused a whirlwind of tragedy and anguish. This is the terrifying tale of Marcus Johnson and Ebony Davis, a couple whose love was shattered by a secret that was both too deadly to keep hidden and too powerful to keep buried. In Houston, Texas, Marcus Johnson, a 32-year-old construction worker, had what seemed like a picture-perfect life. He came from a family of strong values and worked hard to provide for those he loved. He was known as a protector, a man dedicated to his family and his wife, Ebony Davis. Ebony, 28, was a stunningly beautiful hairstylist who lit up every room she entered. Friends admired their quick and intense romance that seemed to have all the makings of a fairy tale. Marcus and Ebony met at a party hosted at a local home. Ebony was new to town and had been invited by a newfound acquaintance. From the very beginning, there was an undeniably strong chemistry between them. Several of the partygoers would later remark that Marcus, typically shy and quiet, couldn't help but smile ear to ear when Ebony spoke. Before long, the pair became very close, spending hours at the party discussing their common interests, their families, and the challenges they had encountered. They had a connection that seemed natural, as if they had been friends for a lifetime, drawing comfort in finding familiarity in a perfect stranger. Within 2 months, the pair were engaged. Their marriage ceremony at the Old Houston Baptist Church was a lavish event, with more than 200 people occupying the pews. Marcus proudly watched as Ebony, breathtakingly beautiful in her Oscar de la Renta gown, walked down the aisle, captivating everyone present. However, Ebony seemed to behave somewhat out of character. While exchanging vows, Marcus observed the faint shaking in Ebony's hands and a distant look in her eyes. He ignored it at the time, too absorbed in the wonder of the day to doubt it. However, looking back, those brief moments suggested a deeper reality that would eventually unravel and reveal the secret Ebony had been concealing. After their honeymoon in the Caribbean, Marcus began to notice subtle changes in Ebony. She became more secretive, locking her phone, disappearing for hours without explanation. She claimed to be working late, but when Marcus visited her salon, it was often empty. Growing suspicious, Marcus tried to convince himself that he was overthinking it. He loved his wife deeply and did not want to believe that things were already starting to turn. Despite Marcus's desire for a blissful marriage, the tension in their home continued to build, and the once passionate relationship started unraveling. One night, while the house was quiet and Ebony had been gone for hours without contact, Marcus found himself pacing the bedroom. Every instinct told Marcus to let his thoughts go, but his curiosity gnawed at him, feeding the doubts that had been growing in his mind for months. After a long time hesitating, he made a decision that would change everything. He began searching through his wife's belongings. For a brief moment, Marcus considered carefully browsing Ebony's things, but as his inner turmoil strengthened, he began to feel his anger rise. He snapped, and in a fury began to dig through his wife's possessions, hoping to find a sign. Drawers were emptied, hangers yanked from the closet, until finally, tucked beneath a pile of old sweaters, he found a small box. His heart pounded as he opened it, expecting perhaps old love letters or forgotten keepsakes. What he found instead made his raging blood suddenly run cold. There, neatly set inside the box, was a birth certificate with a name he had never seen before: Elijah Davis. His breath caught as he stared at the unfamiliar name, hoping it was some kind of mistake. But beneath it, Marcus found a stack of medical records, years of documents chronicling a transition from Elijah to Ebony. His hands shook as he flipped through them, each page confirming the truth he didn't want to believe. Ebony, the woman he had married, had kept this part of her life hidden from him. And Marcus had no idea until now. When Ebony finally returned home that evening, the atmosphere in the home felt different. She felt a sense of uneasiness and dread as soon as she walked through the door. Entering the bedroom, Ebony jumped at the sight of Marcus sitting rigidly on the edge of the bed, his eyes filled with fury and his face flushed with boiling rage. He had laid out every document in the box, filling the bedroom floor with record after record of her secret. Ebony felt faint as the realization of what her husband had found struck her. Panic surged through her as she tried to bridge the distance between them, offering explanations she knew could never fully justify her silence. Every word she managed to get out only deepened the wound between them. The betrayal was too much for Marcus. What they had built now felt like a lie, and the emotions swirling inside him became too powerful to contain. Rage, heartbreak, and confusion blended into something wild and uncontrollable, drowning out any possibility of understanding. Suddenly, in a fit of anger, Marcus flew out of the room, knocking Ebony into the doorframe as he passed. He stormed into the garage, grabbed a hammer, and returned to the house. Ebony's pleas to discuss the papers were drowned out by Marcus's frenzied footsteps as he raced back to the bedroom. What followed was a brutal attack. Marcus, consumed by his fury, struck Ebony repeatedly. Her cries went unheard as he unleashed his rage. By the time he stopped, Ebony's lifeless body lay before him, and Marcus, covered in her blood, collapsed on the bedroom floor. The documents which had sparked his rage lay as gruesome witness to the horrors of a life held in secret. When the police arrived, they found Marcus laying next to Ebony's mutilated body, dazed and broken. The crime scene was one of the most gruesome detectives had ever witnessed. The case immediately captured national attention, not just for its violence, but for the circumstances surrounding Ebony's identity and the brutal way her life had ended. During the trial, Marcus's defense team argued that he had acted in a moment of emotional distress, overwhelmed by the revelation of Ebony's past. They portrayed him as a man pushed beyond his limits by betrayal. The prosecution, however, painted a much darker picture. Marcus was a murderer driven by blind rage. The jury was shown the horrific evidence from the crime scene, photos of the bloodied hammer and the grisly injuries inflicted upon Ebony. Ebony's mother tearfully testified, sharing how her daughter had loved Marcus and had been terrified of losing him if he learned the truth. She claimed that Ebony never got the chance to tell Marcus the truth on her terms, and that none of her daughter's friends knew the truth either. The court listened as both sides presented their case, but in the end, the jury found Marcus guilty of first-degree murder. He was sentenced to life in prison, leaving behind a community shocked and heartbroken by the tragedy. The case ignited broader conversations about identity, trust, and the violence that too often follows marginalized communities, particularly transgender women of color. Ebony's murder was not just the violent loss of one life, but a grim reminder of the fear, discrimination, and anxiety that many in the transgender community deal with every day. Ebony's story sparked public outrage and led to renewed calls for stronger protections and rights for transgender individuals, especially within communities of color where systemic oppression runs deep. The tragedy also exposed the emotional toll of secrecy, how societal rejection can force people to conceal their truths, sometimes with devastating consequences. Ebony's desire to live her truth collided with Marcus's expectations of trust, creating a rift neither of them knew how to bridge. Her death became more than a headline. It was a painful reflection of a society that still struggles to embrace those who do not conform to its norms, and how for many, simply existing as their true selves can be a question of life or death. Marcus Johnson will spend the rest of his life in prison, haunted by the irreversible consequences of his actions. The house where the murder took place has since been demolished, but for those in the community, the memory of that night left a lasting sense of terror. This is a story about love, secrets, and the deadly consequences that can arise when trust is broken. Ebony Davis's life ended in a horrific act of violence, a victim not only of her husband's rage, but of a society that still struggles to accept those who dare to live outside the norm.